Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, control your life.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the 817 podcast. We are here on Father's Day, the day after Juneteenth, and it's been a good weekend.
Yeah, happy Father's Day, Jimmy.
Thanks. The baby woke up at 4:45 this morning to celebrate.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, I went and hung out with my dad in Nowhere, Texas. It was like Benjamin, Texas, 148 people population. Do like corn feeders and all that. And I was like, it was not my style, and it was hot. I would have much rather participated in all the amazing stuff going on in Fort Worth.
Yeah, before we started recording, you were talking about how this weekend was maybe the most proud you've been of Fort Worth in a long time.
Yeah, I think, I just think it's nice to see Fort Worth have events and have community and excitement, enthusiasm, and it's just not being about cowboys. I mean, like, none of it was about cowboys. None of it was about, the history of our West. It was about like celebration, empowerment. It was, historic South Side, Evans Plaza. And so, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, which I would imagine you kind of do, but, Opal Lee, advocate who supported and wanted Juneteenth as a federal holiday, did her annual walk, 2.5 miles to City Hall, but it was a lot more exciting. Obviously, this time, even more people showed out because it became a federal holiday as Biden signed it into action. So, and Opal Lee was there. Joe Biden gave the pin that he signed the executive order in was to Opal Lee. He gave the pin to her, so that was super cool. And so a lot of national attention. Fox Soul channel was out there, which that's just, I don't know what that means, but so it was on TV. So that's awesome. And so anyways, I thought it was just cool to see a different part of Fort Worth being represented. There was a lot of events. There was a lot of concerts, and it just seemed like, wow, look at how do we do more weekends like this in Fort Worth? Like that's where I think our goal should be.
Yeah, I'm with you. And we'll get more into talking about that later in the episode. But first, we'll start with some small stories. And the first one we will talk about, it was a hot week. And apparently, magically, for some unknown reason that no one will tell us, there was a bunch of power plants down, and we got really close to some rolling blackouts. And it was a hot week, but it wasn't hot, we're going to have worse this summer. Did you turn your thermostat up?
I did not.
Yeah, honestly, I was kind of forget this. You guys had your chance to fix all these problems and you actively chose not to. I don't know. Is that bad of me to really want to see this thing burn down so that we can actually get some functional change?
ERCOT spokesperson has now said that we no longer have to conserve energy after the week. So it seems like everything's back. I don't have crazy too much, I guess, about it in the sense of I just think it's unfortunate that, I live in a 2-story home that I really can't. We have the studio upstairs, so that it gets too hot for me to turn down my AC. So
it does get really toasty up here.
Yeah, we always wear t-shirts and shorts because it's game time up here.
But I did a good bit of monitoring of the ERCOT website where they have their dashboard up there for how many megawatts we have in reserve, et cetera, et cetera. And especially Tuesday, we got really close to hitting that line of rolling blackouts, which I don't know if you have the ability to work remotely or just leave on the drop of a dime. I would make plans this summer to be ready to leave.
Really?
Yeah.
You're that serious?
Yeah. I
heard people talking about like this about California from a forest fire perspective. Like they're talking about it's going to be record.
Yeah. Like I would say, I guess the positive of like it being hot versus it being cold is that it's a lot easier to drive somewhere right now. So like, 3 hours to Oklahoma City, figure out how to get to Arkansas. Like if you have the ability to do that and turn your thermostat up to like 80 when you go and unplug everything, I probably would.
Yeah.
And I would have a plan ready for that, because if we got this close right now and they're not even telling us why we were missing all this power, like what is to say that when we get into late July, early August, when it's actual like real hot here, that we're not going to have this issue again.
Yeah, it also said Texas used a record amount of electricity for early June. So that's what ERCOT said. So it looks like nobody was
and that's down. They're trying to act like it's a surprise that we've had population growth in Texas. Like everybody knows that this isn't a surprise. It's like I can't even think of a good example, or I can't think of a funny like anecdote, but it's not a surprise that Texas has grown a lot over the last decade, but we're just sort of sitting with our thumbs up our butts, hoping that something's going to change.
Yeah. So what is your take then? Like, because the U.S. Census Bureau's recently also announced Fort Worth is the second fastest growing city in the nation, and a lot of Texas cities are the fastest, are on that list as well. For just Fort Worth alone is projected to get another 1 million people by 2025.
Not another million, but grow to a million.
Yeah, grow to over 1 million people. Sorry. So yeah,
that'd be a lot.
yeah, that would be scary. So what is your take on that? Like, what's like, I guess like the speed of which more people are showing up to Texas is only going to make this harder unless we do something.
Yeah. So we have this governor who is acting like it's a good thing that he just signed this budget with $1 billion surplus. Yet we're doing nothing to prepare ourselves for the number of people moving here, the strain on our infrastructure, be it roads, be it wireless infrastructure, be it power. And Texas is if we don't do something about it, we're just going to continue to spiral with these issues of not being able to support the population that is coming here. And we're going to do it in the name of acting like we have low taxes and acting like we're business friendly. But we're not actually providing basic needs for people in this state at this point. But we're just going to continue signing off on these budget surpluses, acting like we're doing a good thing. So I think it's bad news for Fort Worth. It's bad news for Texas. We're not setting ourselves up for success, which short term might get Greg Abbott to win the primary next year, which is his only goal right now. That's the only thing he's working towards. But long term, it sets Texas up to be in a really bad situation.
Yeah, after 20, I just trying to figure out why is now everything okay? Like why? Like so they just got I know they said a lot of the wind energy, I guess, weren't getting as much as they expected.
Well, it wasn't wind there. Well, okay, so that's the GOP people started saying, oh, it's because of wind, but there were 8 natural gas plants down this week, and nobody knows why, or they do and they won't tell us why, or are not making public why. And so my question is, what's to stop that from happening again the next time we push 100 degrees, or even worse, when we're pushing 110 degrees?
Yeah. On Monday, the state grid operator warned that an unusual amount of power generation, primarily from natural gas fired power plants, had gone offline. At the same time, weather patterns produced little wind for turbines. For 5 days, ERCOT warned that the supply of power was running low as Texas increased their demand for electricity and hotter weather. It seems like, I guess where I was just seeing, like, it seems like, a little bit of, it seemed like our wind wasn't doing we didn't have, I don't know how it works, but also wasn't being able to pick up where gas-fired power plants dropped.
Yeah.
So, the Public Utility Commission of Texas has forecasted a 15.7% reserve margin for the summer. But a little after Tuesday last week, ERCOT reported demands about 69,200 megawatts, with just over 3,000 megawatts in operating reserves.
Yeah, there were a few times when I was looking at the dashboard that we were using like 73,000 megawatts with reserve in the like 2,800 range. And I think that's the closest we got to having blackouts.
Yeah. And you're saying to the listeners and to myself, who has not been paying attention to this story as much, that we should prepare for blackouts. Like, we should have like a strategy in place if that happens.
For sure. There's nothing that ERCOT has said or done over this last week gives me any faith that this would not happen again. And if this is happening with a natural temperature of 96, when the natural temperature is 108, we are not going to be able to meet demand if we're already this close.
So ERCOT's giving me directions on how to conserve energy. They're not giving me directions on what to do if they fail. What is the Jimmy Sweeney, plan of what would you tell people of how to prepare if they can prepare?
Get in a car and drive away. Fill up your car with gas and drive until it doesn't have any more, and find a place to stay there.
Identify family members you can maybe stay with.
Yeah. I mean, if we're like, Oklahoma City's 3 hours away, big city, easy place to go. Tulsa's 6, Little Rock is 4.5. Just get anywhere that is on the United States grid of power and not on the Texas grid of power. Because the Texas grid of power is a failure. There
you go. Jimmy's gave you guys the knowledge. If it goes down, he said it here, peeps. I was definitely not ready for this, but I love it when you're this hot. No pun intended there, by the way.
Yeah. I made an Airbnb list of just saved pet-friendly places in Oklahoma City and stuff like that, so that if we're in a pinch, I already have places picked out to try and get to.
And see, this is why we have days for people like you. Father's Day, right? This is people like Jimmy right here protecting.
I didn't think I'd ever be like a doomsday preparer, but apparently that is what Texas has done to me over the last year and a half. Thank you, Greg Abbott and your fellow Republicans.
All right, well, I'm excited for this next story. And
speaking of money to blow.
Yes, there you go. I'm excited for this next story. Man, Luke Ranker leaving. I mean, that could be my early L of the show. But him leaving the Star-Telegram.
Sad.
This was a great story that he wrote in the Star-Telegram on Monday. But Fort Worth will tackle a variety of projects with its new $180 million in stimulus. So realize Fort Worth has received $180 million to help correct losses during the COVID-19 pandemic, to fix long-time problems in neighborhoods across the city. Fort Worth expects to receive a little more than $173.7 million from the American Rescue Plan Act, as nearly $2 trillion stimulus package passed in March. So what you're going to see here, there's other groups and programs that also receive funding in the area. Tarrant County received money, including $40 million for Trinity Metro. So that's exciting, as we always talk about transportation. $10.5 million for homelessness programs and $29 million in rental assistance. The first priority is restarting projects delayed by the pandemic, which kind of the lead on here, and it'd be really cool to maybe get on here, is Deputy City Manager Jay Chapa. Don't know if you know anything about him.
The deputy man behind the curtain.
Yeah. The total scope of the projects involve replacing the Saucer Arena with a larger, more modern, and more flexible space. We're talking about the convention center. So, like, that's going to be a main part. The city also work on Commerce Street. This could cost around $25 million. So a lot of upgrades to our convention center, which is, I guess, outdated.
Yeah, and that's a bit. Mitch talked about it on the show a few weeks ago. That's a big attractor for the city, is bringing in these conferences, getting people here, getting tourists to downtown. So I understand the need for that, or maybe not necessarily the need, but the desire to do that and continue to bring in outside money and outside tax revenue. Yeah, I'm interested to see how quick this money gets put to work. I think I saw that it only has to be designated to projects by 2025. So
2020, end of 2024 is what they got here. Spent by the end of 2026.
Okay.
So
in that time frame. So it might be a while before we see some of it put to work. I think the continuing to funnel money into rental assistance when we don't actually have a system that pays it out correctly is interesting. Mm-hmm. I wish that, maybe we would focus on actually getting the money that we had to people. And maybe that's what some of that money will get put to work for. But yeah, I mean, any funding that is coming in to help support the city, I am all for. It's funny. It's kind of funny to me that something like Panther Island, that has gone like a decade saying that it's going to have federal funding to help reroute the river, continues to not be able to find that.
Yeah.
Regardless of where that could come from. So I don't know. Maybe that was just a little humorous thing to me that's not mentioned once again.
Yeah. Yeah. What's crazy about the river, though, it is full. It's cool to see all the rivers full and all the, so much greenery across Texas. Like I said, I went out of town. Yeah. So this would leave another, after the kind of convention center and Commerce Street, this would leave $130 million for improving, the storm and drinking water systems, the spurring growth in East Fort Worth, and boosting minority and women-owned businesses, which is, to me, what's kind of like big. I think that goes to like when we talk about the Juneteenth story is what's next after celebrating and acknowledging these parts of our communities across the country. I thought other stuff, that I thought was interesting about the need to improving our drinking water. I mean, I feel like Fort Worth is really proud of our water. I mean, I felt like, but I said another building is needed to upgrade city's pipes. More than 20% of the city's nearly 3,700 miles of drinking water pipes are cast iron, the most prone to burst.
Yeah, I mean, I would say after the winter storm this year, with what was it, 60% of the city at some point didn't have access to drinking water. I would definitely say replacing those lead pipes is a priority because of that, and hopefully preparing for the next time a winter storm comes.
Yeah, and what I also think is interesting here is they talked about the city also used stimulus dollars to provide free Wi-Fi to 5 predominant low-income neighborhoods. I think there's interest to see how that is actually extended. It's probably going to be similar to the rental relief. But they also threw a shot in here of Carrie Moon, who wants to pitch his $150 million complex in his district. You remember us? We talked about the soccer field. He wants to do all that.
He wants to take money from this to do that?
Well, it said, who needs extra support like medical or psychological services? So last year, the city used part of the original stimulus to turn a former hometown studios extended stay hotel off of North Beach into chronically unhoused people. Programs to boost tourism could also benefit, including soccer complex. Council member Carrie Moon pitched a $150 million complex in his district last year.
Gotcha.
So it was just like an ad of tourism, but I guess isn't it in Keller? or like where wasn't it far away? Like I thought the soccer complex, like we were talking about the Vaqueros.
Yeah, I think it was
far away.
I think it was in Keller, but yeah, I don't know.
But anyways, so I think that's interesting, and we'll continue to track this story. There's money being spent, so when people say there's not money in Fort Worth to do the things we need to do, it's there. We just got to direct it to the right place.
It's absolutely there. Speaking of money to spend in the state of Texas,
man, you're on fire.
Teachers there, Tarrant County or Fort Worth ISD has opted into a program to potentially boost the salaries of teachers. It is an incentive pay program that basically over the next 2 years would begin judging teachers on their student performance and offering bonuses based on a wide variety of factors, but it would take basically the maximum salary of a Fort Worth ISD teacher up to over six figures. The number of people that would receive that is really small, but that's kind of what the headline is. A few big wins from this, even from talking to teacher friends and from this article, is that the student growth measures would not be based on the STAR tests, which teachers hate. Everybody hates STAR tests, and they're not a good measurement of student performance or student improvement. So that's definitely a win that it would not be based on that. But teachers will be able to earn one of 3 designations that stay with them regardless of if they move districts. So the highest classification is master. Teachers with that label could earn up to $32,000 additionally. Exemplary could get up to $18,000, and a recognized teacher could get up to $9,000. I'm all for paying teachers, so I would say that like overall this is a good thing for Fort Worth ISD to be opted into. I think Crowley had already opted into it, and they took teacher feedback on what they potentially wanted it to look like. But I want to hear from your education perspective, maybe what are your thoughts on this?
Regardless of what happens in the world, teachers are always going to be needed. You know, that is like the most human thing we can do as people. And so we have quality people staying there, not feeling burnt out, not feeling like they need to change their career path. Great people in the room who know what they're doing. Teaching is a skill. The average base pay for Fort Worth ISD teachers is $62,000. But now this allotment allows those same teachers the potential to have north of $80,000, $90,000. I think that's super awesome to see, where we provide performance. I mean, like you said, I think it's like the ability to have six figures. You're going to be looking at 2% of teachers.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But what's crazy with all this Summer Bridge federal funding, so all this new money that went to K-12, a lot of our clients are talking about how hard it is to find teachers to do summer learning over the summer. So they're doing $60 an hour.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it would owe like $120,000. So last year they did 30. This was in like Alabama, one of our clients in Alabama, and so they doubled it because of one, we have the money, but also to get teachers to teach over the summer. But I mean, if that was long term, that'd be $120,000 a year. So I think that's what was very interesting, of like how hard it is, I think, especially in this time after the pandemic. So news like this hopefully allows us to retain teachers, but also young people to consider still, I want to teach, because you're seeing a decrease in, kids going to education colleges because of, what you are seeing them, it's going into more things like medical, and when they see Dr. Fauci on TV, I want to be like that and stuff. So still a lot of growth in medical professions, but due to the pandemic and how hard it was to be a teacher, you're having a lot of 18, 19-year-olds be like, maybe I don't want to do education, who would probably do really good at it.
Yeah. And I asked a friend who's a teacher in Crowley ISD, the thing that came to mind immediately for me was, if we have this money, why can't we just raise the pay of teachers regardless? And I think that this program does do a good job of incentivizing current teachers to improve rather than just raising the pay of bad teachers, or incentivizing underperforming teachers to find ways to improve. And obviously, there's a lot that goes into like being a good versus bad teacher. There are a lot of factors in there, from just like externally, what we talked about last week with like how well the schools are performing, how engaged parents can be. And so I see something like this working in combination with that parent engagement program we talked about last week, being a win overall for the district, because you equip teachers with students who might be better equipped to learn and be engaged and learn outside of the classroom by having parents that understand better how to interact with their students and engage with them outside of the classroom. And you give teachers an incentive to further work with those parents, really dive in with these students by potentially offering bonuses and helping attract more talent to the area. So I think that all these programs really work in tandem with each other, and one alone doesn't change things for the district, or especially for underperforming schools in the district, but together they can really elevate the entire area's education programs.
Yeah. I think what we see as the loss, or like the struggle here, is how long it's going to take to implement.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at minimum a couple of years before teachers could get their designations, and then potentially even further for when the payment for that starts.
Spring 2023, and the first eligible batch will be 3rd to 8th grade math and reading teachers who could have their designation.
Yeah, and so for high school or earlier elementary, who knows beyond that? It reminds me of the transportation story we talked about last week, where it's like, this is really awesome. Why are we so far behind that it's going to take like 3 to 5 years before we can get good quality programs like this implemented across the board?
I think that's a great kind of story, and I think a great kind of move to the big story.
So on Thursday, President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law. Senate Bill 457 legally recognizes Juneteenth as a federal holiday, marking the day Union troops landed in Galveston in 1865. Social activists and civic leaders have been raising awareness about Juneteenth for years, and a lot of that has been led by Fort Worth's own Opal Lee. Every year, Miss Opal hosts Opal's Walk, which is a 2.5-mile walk in Fort Worth during the annual Juneteenth celebration in the city. Starting in 2009, she was also doing this walk in Washington, D.C., walking to President Obama's White House. And I mean, she has been leading the charge on this for a long time. And I just couldn't help but feel so happy for her. Seeing her on TV in those moments, standing next to President Biden, hugging Vice President Harris, I just couldn't help but feel really overjoyed for her and all of the work that she has done towards making this happen.
Yeah, and so this year, I mean, but Opal's Walk started at 10 a.m. on Saturday. I was really bummed I missed it in the sense of being out of town for Father's Day, but it just looked like everyone was there. It was cool to see everyone there, see people's Instagram stories and just social media. But it was in Evans Avenue Plaza. And then as always, it leads to the Tarrant County Courthouse. There was hundreds of people there.
I mean, it was big.
Yeah. I guess what it means to Opal Lee, because like a little bit more of the story is that, right, Opal Lee's kind of story and passion comes from remembering her own house being burnt down, I believe on Juneteenth, basically being in the area and Ku Klux Klan, white people burned their house down and told them to leave. And so that's a crazy, like, kind of full circle where now you have people recognizing those horrific moments kind of happen. And that happened all across the state and country. So I think that's a really powerful full circle for her, for like having that trauma from as a kid to now being 94 and sitting next to the president and walking down and people chanting Opal Lee.
Yeah. I feel like there's been a lot of chatter online about like, we didn't ask for this, we asked for X, Y, Z. And I've been trying to like wrap my head around it. Like, obviously Juneteenth becoming a national holiday is not the end all be all for anybody for equality in this country. And one, I really don't see people acting like that. Like, I haven't heard that sort of like chatter of like, oh, we did it, like party's over, like we made it. And that's obviously not the case. But I read in there's an opinion article in the Washington Post, but Fort Worth or the Star Telegram published it. And I just really enjoyed the way that she put the perspective around Juneteenth in helping me frame some thoughts. She says, a cynic or simply a realist would remind us that symbolic change is not the same as substantive improvement. Anti-racist reading lists haven't stopped Black Americans from being killed by the police. The Senate may have voted in favor of recognizing Juneteenth, but the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is still withering away, waiting for the Senate to act. The For the People Act and its voting rights protections are all but dead. And some of the same senators who voted in favor of a new black holiday are sponsoring legislation that would ban the teaching of our country's racist history. A new holiday won't fix the material injustices that continue to fall most heavily on Black America: poverty, state violence, incarceration, environmental hazards, poor access to health care, a legacy of financial discrimination, and limitations on political power. In fact, symbolic wins more often serve to let their champions off the hook. But symbols accomplish something too. Think about all the debates around statues this year. The debates over statues, the fury over the New York Times 1619 Project, the Republican horror at the teaching of quote-unquote critical race theory in public schools should be signs that even the symbolic holds some value. If these smaller declarations didn't have power, why would they be seen as such a threat? Elevating Emancipation Day to the stature of the 4th of July may not change everything, but it does mean something. History is written by its victors, after all. To have our story represented means that we are finally victors too. It means that Black memory is respected. It means that as we come to terms with the truth of our past, the more difficult conversations about reconciliation, reparation, and the racism that still very much exists are given space to begin. A new holiday is inadequate, but as Frederick Douglass concluded in his contemplation on the 4th, we can do more than sit in resignation. Notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, he said, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work. And I think that was a really well put way of saying that while this isn't the end all be all, this has more meaning than it's maybe being given. And I think that this is a really powerful moment. Even just driving around our neighborhood last night and seeing people celebrating, I feel like this is a really powerful moment for our city and for our country that paves the way for more substantive conversations around what's next.
Yeah. No, that was well said. And yes, I also just, while you were speaking, confirm, it was her home was burned down by whites. It's not confirmed that it was Ku Klux Klan, but white supremacists in 1939 when she was 12 years old on Juneteenth. So really what a full circle story for her. And I think where, my boat always goes to is, right, my whole boat always goes to, okay, we're celebrating freedom, right? We're celebrating freedom and acknowledging the emancipation. However, right now, I think it's what do we do now to celebrate opportunity and provide the acceleration to create Black success in not just Fort Worth, but in America. And what's going to be really interesting to see is I am very proud of, the city of Fort Worth. I mean, let's be clear. The last time Opal Lee was on stage, she was telling all of us to vote for Deborah Peoples. So I know a lot of us walking by her did not vote for Deborah Peoples. Mm-hmm. So what we do next, we have a Tatiana Jefferson, right? That's coming up. This, research shows, right? Like I always talk about this in Black wealth and, Black households who are led by someone with a college degree has $23,400 of wealth, while a white household that is headed by someone who is a high school dropout has $34,700 in wealth, right? The medium family, white family, has $171,000. The medium Black family is $17,000. That's the next step. And I think if Fort Worth really wanted to play big here, is what this weekend showed me is the possibility or the ability to celebrate Black success from Fort Worth needs to have a Juneteenth museum. We need to celebrate Ornette Coleman and jazz and the history there. There needs to be a jazz museum next door. There needs to be Black businesses. There's over 2 million Black families who have the credit score and the jobs to buy a house, but they don't have the down payment. We need to create programs that allows for Black people to build wealth in, South Side, in Fort Worth. These are the things that I think now are the next steps, is how I see how pretty Cowtown is over there, right? Mm-hmm. I see how pretty that hotel is, mm-hmm. and all that, things you're building, putting Melt over there, Avoca over there. But let this not just be a one-time a year visit to Evans Plaza. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I really do think, like, we talked about 12 Mighty Orphans last week. The Cowgirl Museum already has an exhibit around that with behind-the-scenes photos. And like Luke Wilson's mom's a professional photographer, and that's where a lot of that content is coming from. But like nothing like that immediately popped up after Miss Juneteenth. And we do have this history here. Historic Southside has a lot of space. Like, yep. How do we invest in that neighborhood in a way that works with them, works with the little like Juneteenth house that's over there that has a bunch of stuff in it that that team has been showing off for a long time, but could use a bigger, nicer space to bring people into. And with that, how does Fort Worth attract a more diverse tourist base to an area like that, showing off and telling the story of the Black community in the city and its history here, and working with that community to make sure that it is the story that should be accurately told? I think there's a great opportunity, again, like for places like Tulsa, Fort Worth.
Alabama, Louisiana, our generation, and I think the upcoming generations, if military museums are for the boomers and they want to go see museums on war, we will want to see and be exposed to real rite to passage, Black history experienced museums provides leverage. And so Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Juneteenth, Fort Worth, and Opal Lee, a great opportunity for us to lead in providing Black tourism and exposing America to culture that's been hidden and suppressed in museums for a long time. Let's go ahead and move, into our wins and losses. But overall, let's just say, big win for the city of Fort Worth this weekend. But you want to jump into your first loss?
Yeah, my loss this week comes at a state level, and I mentioned it earlier, but Greg Abbott signed the budget this week that shows $1 billion surplus. And like we already talked about all the ways that the state is failing right now and that the state is set up to fail in the future. We're not meeting the basic needs of the constituents and the people in Texas. So like, how is $1 billion surplus a win? Like that's a loss. That's a bad thing that we're not providing for people and are just saying that we're hoarding money to try and gain and curry favor with a voting base. And even worse than that, he vetoed the funding for the legislative branch, which he said he was going to do after Democrats walked out so that there couldn't be a quorum for them to suppress voting rights in the state. But our politicians, our state reps only make like $7,500 a year directly from the state. That money also isn't funding all of the people that work on Capitol Hill in those areas. This isn't like Abbott stealing a bunch of money from Democrats and punishing them. This is Abbott punishing everyday people who honestly just kind of happened to be in the room and like they, probably felt like they had a good bit of job security with what they were doing. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm not getting paid. So really just a dick move on it. Like I don't think there's like easier way to put it.
Down payment for the wall.
Yeah. Hyped up a $250 million down payment for the wall and taking donations for the rest. And
that's what's crazy about the donation thing is they were realizing, oh, wow, Steve O'Bannon Trump's first kind of right hand man who like basically raised like $20 million. Abbott's like, we saw it work with this guy, let's like copy his business model because enough. Do
you know what donating money to the government to so that they can do stuff with it is called?
What?
Taxes. So maybe if we made businesses in Texas pay taxes, we wouldn't have to worry about taking donations from people. Same with nationally. Yeah. Like maybe if we just held people accountable to pay for what they owe, for the upper class to pay what they owe and not have ways to cheat the system, then we wouldn't be having to ask for donations. This is a stupid thing to take donations on anyways, but
but it's just crazy. I got to send that story to you, but O'Bannon, like he would like take pictures in front of people just like working on the border. Yeah. And like acting like, oh, we're getting this job done. We're getting it built. And like so much money got paid to him and like a couple other people. Yeah. It was just wild. But anyways, my loss is I'm not going to do one today because that's how positive I feel about Fort Worth. He's like, I did Look that there. No L's today. No L's. So we'll just keep on going. But wins, I guess my win would be, I'm a big fan of the nature reserve.
Yeah. It's your favorite place.
Yeah. The only thing I don't like about it is that, it costs a lot of money. So people, can't go if you can't afford $5 a person to go to this thing. So that's a different thing, but it is in white settlement. So you know how they roll off of Confederate Way. Those are all the things I curse myself under my place when I go there. But but anyways, They're building a boardwalk in Fort Worth Nature Center and Refuge after a planned expansion. It's a $3 million renovation to the boardwalk, which will begin in 2022. The center received $1.5 million grant from Texas. Why I love this place is because every great city has great nature. Unfortunately, ours is 20 minutes from downtown. Obviously, with me and you living close to Taney, we're big advocates of all that greenery between downtown and our exits. I do not need a Papados. I do not need university. I do not need anything. But I think if we can create that into, miles of hikes and trails close to Trinity River, make it feel like you have nature, like Austin, Portland, all these places that smart people were trying to attract tech talent. But still, I'm not going to knock, like, this is a win so that the nature reserve is getting funded. But I also think there's opportunity for us to do something similar closer to the city.
Yeah, I'm with you. My win is that a massive rubber duck is coming to Trinity Park.
When I saw this story, I knew this was like Jimmy. This is going to be Jimmy's win.
My child loves ducks. She calls them dogs. Every animal right now is a dog. So I'm very excited to take her to see the world's largest rubber duck from July 23rd to 25th at Trinity Park. We might just camp there. we might just camp and stare at the rubber duck for a long time.
And it looks like it's done by like the Duck Kindness Project or something like that. And the whole goal of this big duck is like to support kindness and everyone having something positive to come to. And so I think it's cool. I listen to like the organization team and their mission. So pretty awesome.
The article about it's on Fort Worth Magazine's website right now, and I'm sure we'll probably be in the magazine.
And we'll put it in the notes as well.
But go see the world's largest rubber duck.
Yeah, perfect. Well, great episode. If this is your first episode, welcome. If you haven't subscribe. Every week, the 817 podcast, we highlight culture, news, trends. So we love doing this. We're going to have more interviews coming up with people all across the city. Great time to be here, and looking forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life. Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, like, double tap. Now they control your life.